All right, so before we get started, I'm going to give a brief history of Steve Duda and Extra Records and Serum. So what do we say about Steve Duda? He's kind of like the most interesting synth guy on earth. It's like if Nikolai Tesla, synth Jesus, and like became crossed with like the genius Forrest Gump of like three different waves of electronic and dance music. Let's pull a picture of him. Here he is. He does kind of look like Synth Jesus. So Steve was born in Menlo Park, California. He studied music composition of UC California. And in the mid-90s, his first job was working as a tech support guy for Avid, which later became DigiDesign, and are the guys who invented Pro Tools. The story goes, he ended up in the late 90s working on the Nine Inch Nails album, The Fragile, because they were doing incredible things with Pro Tools. Like if you have time, go check out the Sound City documentary, and they go into some of the stuff that Nine Inch Nails and Flood and Alan Mould did with Pro Tools in the late 90s when it was very early and very, just working in a digital audio workstation was very new. And they did a lot of groundbreaking sound design stuff. They were pushing the boundaries of Pro Tools, and they kept breaking it, and they kept calling Avid tech support. And finally, the manager at Avid was like, I'm just gonna give you my best tech support dude and send him down there to help you. And that was Steve Duda. And they realized quickly that he's sort of a genius, and they just hired him to do sound design for The Fragile. So he did some work with multi-sampling, so he multi-sampled some of the pianos. If you look on Wikipedia, he has credits doing like vocals and stuff. And one of the things he worked out with Alan Mould while he was working on it was the first idea of doing multi-mic sampling. So if you have something like addictive drums where you can pull up a kick drum and then by twisting knobs you can get different mic positions and stuff. Him and Alan Mould got drunk one night and thought that up, and then they actually did it where he sat down and he would, for instance, sample a kick drum at all the different like loudnesses and velocities with multiple mics, and then created like banks of different kicks with different mic positions and whatnot, so that they could program kicks and then give the whole file to their mixing engineer and have them mix it down as if it was regular drums, even though it was just sampling drums. This is mind-blowing in the mid-90s. Like a 486 computer had like a couple of megabytes of memory. Like this was an idea that was way ahead of the available technology. And I think to do it with the drum kit they had to use like 8 different rack mount samplers, and then like one sampler would be the kick drum and one would be the snare. Anyways, he did that stuff with, did that sound design work for The Fragile, and he kept all those sound banks and eventually developed BFD, the first multi-mic drum sampler with F-Expansion later in, I believe, the early 2000s. So after making a lot of money for licensing that, he moved to LA to pursue a music career, and then hooked up with Deadmau5, and then became Deadmau5's sort of music collaboration partner. They did the BSOD group, which was Deadmau5's first Beatport Top 100 song, and they started Extra Records. And then he just kind of kept designing like little synth, like mini synths and like plugins for his friends, who slowly became people like Skrillex and Zed. And that's where you get things like LFO Tool, which came out in 2011, which was like a MIDI syncable volume shaper with like a multi-band mode, which no one had ever seen before. He did another drum sampler called Nerve, which had groove extract. Like, so you could take the rhythm of a drum loop and extract it and then apply it to a different MIDI single. And he did that like a couple of years before Ableton integrated that. He also did Cthulhu, which is kind of this weird one-note arpeggiator chord bank program. And then from hanging out with like Skrillex and 12 Planet, all those guys, he saw them using Massive, and he just had the idea of like, oh, I could take Massive and make this better. And then he spent about 2 years programming it and created Serum. And getting Serum in 2012 was pretty wild because he's always been really involved with the dance music community. And so it felt like when I got it, I think I got it a little later, like 2013. It seemed like every time I wanted a feature, like I would just update it after a month, and like the new feature was there. And you could like tweet at him and be like, hey, how does this work? And he'd reply. And even if you go on like Reddit on the like Extra Records Serum forum and ask a question, like half the time he'll answer it. So he's always been really involved in the dance music community, and like kind of just built things that musicians need, which is very refreshing to have like a synthesizer that's built by almost one person. I think one other person did the UI for Serum, and he had like one other programmer do some of the math for like the internal logistics. But you're getting like one person's take on a thing, and it's a person who makes music and hangs out with really good musicians, so he's kind of incorporating features that musicians want and need. So yeah, that's a general wrap-up of Serum and Steve Duda. Next, we're going to go into a basic overview of popular forms of synthesis.